Hi, welcome to the new series powered by Better Earth Theory. I'm Sharon, and today we're going to talk about the United Nations Plastic Treaty. So, first of all, let's get our definition straight. What is the United Nations? So, the United Nations is a group of 193 countries who are working together to try to solve big problems. Some of the problems that they solve involve how can we make sure that every single kid around the world can get a good education? Another one might be how can we stop global warming? These are all sorts of big, complicated questions that are really important but hard to solve. The United Nations has therefore set out a set of goals that they're trying to achieve. So, what they try to do is to make sure that everyone lives well and uses resources responsibly. This set of goals are called the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And a big part of it is actually plastics. Now, plastic is a big deal. Think about it. Plastic is super useful. If you just look around, you'd probably see like 20 things made out of plastic just in your room. For example, my water bottle here has a cap that's made out of plastic. But plastic, even if it's super useful, can sometimes be bad. Plastic in nature can hurt animals. You've probably seen videos where, an animal is like tangled in a plastic bag or ate so much plastic that they died. And also, bits and pieces of plastic often end up in our water, in our food, and they just go back into our human bodies, and that can also be bad for us. Plastics also can release chemicals into the environment that aren't supposed to be there and cause even more damage, which is why we need to be careful when we deal with plastics. So the United Nations came up with this this plan to try to fix plastic pollution. The name is very long, but I'll read it to you. The Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Which basically, we all call it the INC, because that name is way too long. So, the goal of the INC is to create an international treaty that makes sure all countries follow these plastic rules. So, a treaty is basically something that countries have to follow, or else they will face a certain punishment. So, this is how they want to keep people in line on how they're dealing with plastic so that they don't throw away plastic and just don't care about it and stuff like that. The INC has held, well, 5 sessions since 2022, and in 2025 August, which is around 2-3 months ago, um, they still haven't come up with a result. So let's try to look at why they haven't been able to get to an answer. So the three main things that the INC is trying to um, address is, first of all, what do we do with the plastic that is already in the environment? Like the plastic that's already floating in the ocean, already dumped on some island somewhere. What do we do with that? Do we clean it up? Do we just leave it as it is? What can we do? The second question is how to and how much more plastic can countries make? Because we just talked about it. Plastic is really useful. And so we can't really just stop making plastic like right here and right now. That will cause a lot of problems, especially plastic is so part of our lives now. Like, if we stopped making new plastic, then how are people going to make the needles to how are people going to make like these medical devices that need plastic? How are we going to package our food safely? There are all these things that we need to think about. And then, how should countries be stopped from making too much plastic or dealing with plastic wrong? So that's what punishment it should be if some countries break the rules that we're trying to set here. Because you can't send a whole country to jail, right? So we need to think of something else that will maybe stop people from breaking our rules. So, with these three questions, there are around two major groups. The first group wants less plastic, and the second wants more, or at least the same level of plastic we're making today. So let's look at what they're thinking. So the group that wants less plastic, some of them include small island countries with really big plastic problems. So these are countries that some of them are situated on the Pacific Ocean, some in the middle of the Caribbean. So because they're surrounded by ocean and oceans have these like huge currents that bring water around the world, the plastics that are thrown away somewhere else all end up on these islands. And so these islands are dealing with mountains and mountains of plastic that they didn't even make or use. And so they don't want people to keep making plastic because then it's just all going to get dumped back on their homes, right? And another group that doesn't want plastics would be a lot of European countries. So these countries, they have money and they're already developing a lot of plastic alternatives. They think that they should be able to help other countries, including themselves, um, produce less plastic and use something else instead. So they want less plastic too. So what this group wants together, they want production caps, which is something that is basically like a number where we say, okay, this is the total amount of plastic that a country can make. You cannot make more than that. You can make, obviously, you can make less than that, but this is all you are allowed to make. They also want something called the polluters pay principle, which is basically the countries that produce this plastic will then, and you're causing the harm to these other countries, then you have to pay for that. Pay for, cleaning up the plastic, helping them with their healthcare system and stuff like that. What this group does not want would be, they don't want loose regulation, which is like, no one's actually looking at if people are completing their goals and stuff like that, or like unclean oceans that no one's like dealing with. That's what they don't want. Okay, so now we talked about the group that wants less plastic. Let's go to the group that wants more plastic. So this group contains oil-producing countries because plastics are actually made of, well, oil, the one that you drill into the earth and then get out of it. If you want more details on that, we have a chemistry series about plastics that you can look into. We'll link it in the show notes. And plastic manufacturing countries, so countries that are making plastic and making money out of it, obviously they don't want plastic to be stopped, right? And then there's also countries that are less developed, less economically developed countries, then they would also want more plastic because plastic is so cheap and helps make a lot of things a lot easier, like packaging food and like transporting stuff. So this makes it easier for countries to be able to build their economies because they don't have to waste money on like expensive materials and they can instead just use plastic, right? So, of course, they would not want the production caps that we just talked about, and they wouldn't want too much environmental responsibility or like paying for pollution and stuff like that. What they would want, though, is to promote economic development and protecting national interest and preventing poverty. So, this is what the group that wants more plastic would think. And so, with these very different groups having totally different and opposite ideas, the results were that there was no agreement. The countries didn't come to an agreement on what they want, and so there was no treaty that was created. And also because there's already been 5 sessions of the INC, they are only thinking about hosting future talks to do another to restart and like deal with the treaty, but it's not confirmed. So it's also possible that we don't talk about a plastic treaty for a really long time, which is not a good thing to happen, especially with how severe plastic pollution is getting. Everywhere in the environment, the air we breathe, it's hurting our health, it's hurting the environment, it's hurting other animals. Something needs to be done, right? So, what can we do now if the United Nations isn't working? Well, some ideas are we can start with smaller regional treaties. So, smaller regional treaties involve just, like a handful of countries, like 3, 4, like 8, and 10, instead of like 196 or 193. right? So less less countries make it easier to agree on things, and they can keep track of whether or not they're following their plastic rules together and support each other in developing new technology um, to help replace plastic. They can also be national policy reforms where, you know, either like groups inside the country say, okay, we're going to tell the government that no, they need to change our laws so that people will use less plastic and use alternatives instead, right? So there's all sorts of different things that we can do instead for now until a global treaty can be reached. And so that's what we can work on. So we're going to wrap things up now. Thank you so much for watching our videos. It's powered by Better Earth Theory, a group that is dedicated to educating youth about plastic pollution issues. Together, we can make Earth cleaner. Thank you, and bye!